Hello world of YouTube and welcome to another episode of Redacted, the show where every album has a story. And this month I'm going to be taking a look at an album that not only did I tease a year ago this month via a discography review recontextualization where I talked about this album in context of the band's discography, but it also fits within sort of the tangent I'm pulling off of the year of the sequel in Redacted by taking a look at 2020's sequel, 2022. It is the sixth album by UK dance punk band Bloc Party, Alpha Games. Now, I've talked about my opinion on Alpha Games via not only the listening log back in 2022 when it came out, but also within the context of the band's discography via the video I talked about in the intro. If you want to know my thoughts on this album, they have been well articulated up until this point. I think this album is really solid, if not kind of brief, felt even more brief via the deluxe edition that dropped shortly after, on top of EP, which dropped not too shortly after the deluxe edition dropped. It just felt like this era was very much one of creative exploration by the band, all centered around this atmosphere that dives into toxicity pretty strongly. You know, there's this sort of through line via the characterization of sort of Kayle's tongue-in-cheek performance that crops up on a couple of songs that has some fun sort of sequencing play in the original that I just kind of expand upon via some of the bonus tracks and the like. And I also just kind of play with the pacing of the record a bit. I like the sequencing of the original Alpha Games for the most part, but I feel like, especially with some of the bonus tracks that drop, there's just some real fire there that I'm shocked didn't end up on Alpha Games proper. So my version is a little bit longer than the original, but I also do something a little interesting with one of the other songs. But either way, that was my aim, was to kind of keep the thematics really strong and keep some of the strengths in the sequencing intact, but just add a little more zest to it. You know, create a more fruitful listening experience, because this era has had a lot from this band, and I feel like it should really be showcased, because I think that they really did bounce back with Alpha Games in a strong way. My version of Alpha Games is 16 tracks and 52 minutes in length, so again, it's a bit longer than the original version, but I'll tell you why I laid the track listing out in the way that I did after showing it to you right now.
He says he knows when I've been drinking. He says he knows when I'm lost. There you go, looking like a snake. Choose to receive, you can choose to ignore. You should know the truth, you should know the truth, you should know the truth, you should know the truth. Are you ready for the high life, for things to go away? Are you ready for the big time? Callum is a snake, you have been warned. Now these boys can't cope, so I put my faith in what's to come, for it's the big one. Taken by the moon, taken by the blood moon. Come on, if you're lollygagging on the way, just to believe you'll be replaced. Now Strut.
So like I said in the discography review recontextualized, I really love how this album opens with Day Drinker and Traps acting as this sort of two-hit dance flurry. I just added acting out to carry the emotional resonance from especially Day Drinker a little bit farther into another really good kinetic jam that was a bonus track that I think absolutely should have been on the final album proper. I even basically keep Day Drinker through Of Things Yet to Come in their original order. I just sort of add other songs to extend some of the ideas from the record a little bit farther as a whole. You know, I have High Life after You Should Know the Truth, because I think You Should Know the Truth does sort of mellow out the groove a little bit while sort of adding on to some of the emotions sort of stirring. And High Life sort of continues that by also bring that cattiness that Kayleigh brings out a couple times on the record through the bridge of that. And I think it acts, especially when it comes during the bridge, as a good sort of mood shift into Callum as a Snake, because I love the dance groove of High Life, but it's a different sort of energy than what a lot of the album has been sort of channeling. I just think it sort of comes in really good after You Should Know the Truth sort of fades into the sunset. I love that song, and I think that, again, it comes in a good place in the original. But after High Life, I go into Callum as a Snake, because, again, I think it sort of extends some of that style from the end of High Life really strongly, and sort of helps continue what the narrator that Kayleigh is sort of writing through is sort of overtly talking about in the veins of, like, deception and the like. You know, calling out the person of being, like, a flirt and doing too much on High Life, I think, just, again, sets up Callum as a Snake strongly, which I think does go into Girls Are Fighting after that really well. I just think that that's one of the few instances where, like, while I think a lot of the album's highs are a bit too brief, The Girls Are Fighting is a song that I think goes on for a little too long in the album version, and I think that the edited version is just fine. You know, I think it's a little tighter, a little more snuggly inside of the track listing, lightening the groove from The Girls Are Fighting a little bit with Of Things Yet to Come. And while the groove is still there, the kineticism is still sort of deep, I like Of Things Yet to Come's place in the original track listing for being this sort of lull in the noise, you know, because it seemed like Bloc Party really focused on keeping a sort of energy to this, even if they changed the intensity of it. And I like that Of Things Yet to Come kind of feels like the bitter, frustrated come down from the aggression that sort of came out through some of the cattiness and fighting literally over the last couple of tracks. And I think it has this mood to it that I think feels indicative of a lot of this album's energy. And I use it as sort of a sonic stepping stone of sorts, because from there I go to The Blood Moon, a song that sort of takes a look at the mood of this and just sort of observes it through this vacuum of the Blood Moon. You know, while not necessarily alluded to being a thing on the album proper, it's sort of something that feels in the wheelhouse of the mood that the original record has, and I think sort of acts as a good, again, continuation of the energy, but just a nice little sort of sonic pivot before diving further back into electronic-rooted kineticism within Situ, one that also is just another really strong banger. It's got a really nice build to it. I love the way that the hook of this song, again, sort of permeates some of the mentality that this album is tackling, which I let evolve a little bit more overtly throughout Strut, a track that I'm amazed wasn't on the original Alpha games once again, because it has this sort of character deconstruction style to its writing that I think, especially following the overt messaging and just attitude of In Situ, I think is a really nice sort of, again, rug pull that also has some fun lead play, a really good drum line, and just a good sort of energy between the drum and the bass that I think very much enhances the mood of Alpha games by and large, and again, I feel like needed to be here. And I figured if I were doing these sort of character pieces in the track listing, even if it sort of pulls the energy out a lot farther, sort of like Blood Moon, but even more intensely, I figured I'd put the track Blue, that I think definitely pulls out from the groove a lot more intensely, but keeps the gravitas there in some good build-ups into the choruses. I like the way this song flourishes, and I think that it acts as a good sort of just mood keeper You know, while the album has been swept up in this energy, I wanted to keep this mood intact because the next couple of tracks sort of keep the energy ramped up to almost a full, and I wanted to have those sort of flourishes build to a moment like Rough Justice, which comes much later in the track listing to accent this second sort of fight to break out. A track that comes much later in the track listing, but it acts as this sort of climax of the record with it and By Any Means Necessary, where there's a lot of confrontation going on in the lyrics more intensely than on The Girls Are Fighting, and I think keeps the mood intense and the groove a lot more kinetic, a lot more directly, but doesn't have some of the big dazzling flourishments seen in some of the groovier moments earlier in the track listing. You know, By Any Means Necessary kind of helps build the sonic palette back into a fuller place by its end. And from there I close the album with how it originally closes, because I think If We Get Caught sort of carries the groove By Any Means Necessary sort of plants and sort of just helps smooth it out and round it out into a conclusion for this record, which I thought was really strong on the original version and just figured I'd keep it intact. You know, If We Get Caught has this sort of rise to an emotion. If We Get Caught kind of helps bring the emotions from a lot of the stuff exerted over the last couple tracks as well, but again, just kind of helps bring them and pivot them into a place that gets sort of paid off a little more strongly on the Peace Offering. A song that has its own sort of buildup of sorts. So it has the theatricality come back. You know, you've got all of these emotions sort of being exerted. It's this let's get everything on the table once and for all place on the album. And I think the band, in the original version, utilized a solid sequencing to get to that point, but it was something that I definitely felt like needed to have a bit more to bring it to this point, in my opinion. And that is what I feel like I've done on my Redacted of it. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Would you like to listen to it for yourself? It's linked in the description with a YouTube and Spotify link. If you did like this episode of Redacted, give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week, depending on what I've got going on. Next week is going to be a little more business as usual as far as the stuff that I'm making and dropping. But hopefully you've liked how this month has shaped up so far. Either way, I'm going to go. I've been Viral Rack. You guys have a good day, lives, and situations. And I'll see you another day.